Ullrich Keller had no particular reason to come to Tulum. When he landed among the swaying palms and neon-painted surf shacks, he carried more books than plans. Recently retired and feeling rudderless in Berlin, he'd booked his flight on a whim, chasing a promise he'd made to himself in hushed tones. This would be the year he befriended the world, or at least tried. The first week slipped by in a haze of salty air and indecisive mornings. Ullrich took breakfast every day at the same open-air cafe behind the town square. His Spanish was halting, but the waitstaff smiled forgivingly. He told himself he was gathering courage, preparing his experiment, to see if he could manufacture camaraderie in a place where no one knew his name. On a muggy afternoon, he sat alone with his journal and counted how many times the same dog circled his table before disappearing behind the bakery. Ullrich realized, with a start, that he hadn't spoken to anyone since Tuesday. The journal page in front of him was blank, mocking. "Who am I outside my routines?" he scribbled in shaky pen. Determined to break the pattern, Ullrich made a list, one new introduction each day. The next morning, nerves prickling, he joined a sunrise yoga class advertised on a painted board down by the beach. Mats lined the sand, and the instructor, sun-burnished and grinning, beckoned him over, calling for everyone to partner up for stretches. That's how Ullrich met Tomas, a local chef whose hands were as broad as his smile. Tomas teased him gently about his stiff hamstrings, but helped him through every pose, sharing jokes and stories between breaths. After class, Tomas insisted Ullrich try his restaurant that evening. It felt easy, almost accidental. Was this how friendship began? Sitting at Tomas's bustling taqueria that night, Ullrich felt a flicker of possibility, stronger than the heat from the salsa on his tongue. Tomas introduced him to the rest of the kitchen staff, even poured him a house-made mezcal. The clatter, laughter, and rhythmic dance of teamwork drew Ullrich in. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't watching life from the outside. But as the evening wore on, and the restaurant filled far beyond its modest patio, Ullrich realized he'd been invited into a world already in motion. Conversations swirled around him, quick and colloquial, tethered to shared history. When Tomas left his side to wrangle plates or greet old friends, Ullrich felt the familiar frost of isolation creep back in. Back in his rental that night, Ullrich stared at the simple phrase he'd written earlier, "Who am I, outside my routines?" and added, "Who will I be if I try again?" He promised himself he would return to the taqueria, and not just as a customer. The next morning, Ullrich woke before dawn and watched the sky lighten over Tulum through the screen of his window. Back in Berlin, he might have gone back to sleep, but here, among unfamiliar sounds and obligations, a gentle insistence propelled him out the door. He went walking, past the tidy yoga mats on the sand, past the market where vendors quietly arranged their fruit pyramids, until he reached Tomas's restaurant. The kitchen door stood open, the smell of onions and roasting peppers already brightening the air. Ullrich hesitated, heart thumping before stepping inside. Tomas, surprised but smiling, greeted him with an apron and a question. "Ever worked a breakfast shift, Ullrich?" "No," Ullrich answered, grinning nervously, "but I can chop onions." "Then start with these," Tomas said, handing him a pile the size of a bowling ball. At first, everything moved too quickly. The sizzle of oil, orders barked in slang, and Ullrich worried he would just be in the way. But Tomas didn't let him hide at the prep table. Whenever someone stopped by the kitchen, Tomas made sure to introduce him. "This is Ullrich," he'd say, "our German specialist in eggs." The teasing helped. By noon, Ullrich had shared a dozen awkward jokes in Spanish, 2 stories from Berlin about winter and bread, and a burnt omelet for which everyone applauded. Sometime, amid the laughter and clatter, the other staff began calling him Don Uli. The days turned into a pattern. Morning shifts in the kitchen, afternoons exploring the cenotes, evenings listening to music in the square. Gradually, Ullrich found himself anticipating not just the taste of Tomas's tacos, but the company at the staff table, where everyone squeezed elbows and swapped gossip. Tomas taught him to play dominoes, and soon Ullrich's hands remembered the shapes of camaraderie, their motions carrying laughter and gentle mockery. It wasn't always easy. There were moments lost in the blur of language, and days when loneliness swelled unexpectedly. But Ullrich kept showing up. The more he came back, the more the staff looked for his arrival, calling his name when he was late, saving him a stool near the window. Toward the end of his stay, Ullrich organized a Sunday picnic for the whole restaurant staff, a gesture uncharacteristic of the man who'd once kept to corners and routines. As the afternoon faded to gold, Tomas handed him a beer and clinked the bottles together. "You tried your experiment," Tomas said, "and look, you created something." Ullrich looked around at his new friends, their laughter mixing with the music from the beach. He didn't need to write anything in his journal that night. He had found his answer, not in theory or quiet observation, but in the unplanned collisions of daily living. For the first time in years, Ullrich felt at home, rooted not by habit but by the unexpected, extraordinary gift of friendship.